Today on Variant, I give you the history of Apocalypse. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I would love for X-Men and Fantastic Four to be part of the Marvel Studios cinematic universe. I'm your host, Arris. As we all know, X-Men Apocalypse hits theaters in the US May 27th. And since the movie is going to focus on Apocalypse, of course I had to tell you all about this extremely powerful mutant, so you'll have a better idea of what he's all about going into the movie. Before we get into that, we wanted to thank all of you for sending in your videos for the upcoming 1 million subscribers episode. The response was literally overwhelming. In fact, so many of you responded that we had to push back the episode to next week to make sure we had enough time to go through all of them and get as many in as possible. So be on the lookout for that late next week. And I just want to say again, the 1 million subscriber giveaway, people, serious swag. But with that said, let's kick this pig. Apocalypse was created by Louise Simonson, Walter Simonson, and Jackson Guice. He first appeared shadowed in a cameo in X-Factor Volume 1, Issue 5 in 1986, before fully appearing in Issue 6 of that series. Newcomer to the book, Louise Simonson imagined the character of Apocalypse and had artist Jackson Guice design him. The final page of X-Factor Issue 5 then revealed Apocalypse as the master of the Alliance of Evil. And from that moment on, the rest was pretty much history, so let's get into his comic book origin. The mutant who became Apocalypse was born 1,000 years ago in Aquaba. According to the comics, he is the first known being on Earth to have the X gene, which is why he's known as the first mutant. Hence nicknames like the First One, the Immortal, the Eternal One, and so on. Though him being the first mutant has been disputed with new characters developing in the Marvel Universe / multiverse, but I'm not going to get into that, so do what you wish with that information. Having blue lips and gray skin is a side effect of the X gene, which led to him being abandoned as an infant. They kind of pulled a 300 and tossed him off a cliff. Except, I don't think they really tossed him off a cliff. At least, I don't think they did. Anyway, he is rescued by Baal of the Sandstormers. Baal's like the only one who sees that this child has a crap ton of potential and a strong will to survive. So Baal names him En Salbanor, which is Arabic for the morning light. But even though that's what it really means, Marvel translates it to the first one. The Sandstormers live by a survival of the fittest mentality and believe that only those who are strong enough to survive conflict and hardship are worthy of life. It's about this time that the time-traveling King the Conqueror appears in Egypt and assumes the identity of Pharaoh Rama-Tut. Since he knows who En Salbanor is going to become and where he is, Rama-Tut sends one of his generals, Ozymandias, and his army to annihilate the Sandstormers and find baby Apocalypse. Well, not baby Apocalypse, but young Apocalypse. During the attack by the general's forces, En Salbanor and Baal are injured and hide out in a cave. Baal dies, but before he does, he reveals advanced alien technology that is hidden in the cave, which was left behind by the deity-like aliens known as the Celestials. Pulling a Darth Vader and being all like... Actually, that didn't happen, but En Salbanor did vow revenge on Rama-Tut for Baal's death. Seeking revenge, En Salbanor enters the Pharaoh city posing as a slave, but instead decides to hook up with Ozymandias' hot sister Nefri. I guess that's an understandable distraction. Nefri was into it until she saw his true appearance, at which point she rejected him and went to her brother for protection, effectively giving us our first recorded restraining order. That counts, right? This broke poor En Salbanor's heart, and his resulting anger caused his mutant abilities to fully emerge. It's at this point he renames himself Apocalypse. So for all you wondering how he got his name, boom, you're welcome. As for Rama-Tut, he escapes, but En Salbanor manages to capture Ozymandias, and he uses celestial technology to transform him into a blind psychic, made of living stone. Years go by, and Apocalypse realizes that he no longer ages. He's got some kind of mutant fountain of youth going on in his body. Thousands of years pass, with Apocalypse traveling around planet Earth, convincing whole civilizations that he is a god and creating legends and myths about himself. He also manipulates them into fighting wars, justifying his actions as necessary for growth, judgment, and destruction. Eventually, Apocalypse puts himself into hibernation, because who doesn't like a good nap? I know I do. He plans to remain in hypersleep for 2 centuries, thinking that mutants would be more common on Earth over time. But Apocalypse wakes up nearly a century earlier than planned due to the arrival of the time-traveling mutant Cable, who ironically traveled to this point in time hoping to prevent Apocalypse from awakening. But clearly, that didn't go over too well. Apocalypse then decides the Earth is ready for more testing, and then hires the Alliance of Evil to capture the mutant Michael Nowlin because he can boost the powers of other mutants. This plan brings Apocalypse face to face with the first incarnation of X-Factor, when the team was composed of the original X-Men. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us full circle to Apocalypse's first appearance, but now let's talk about the people who you're probably curious about due to the X-Men Apocalypse trailer, Apocalypse's Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen are incredibly powerful, genetically enhanced superhumans, handpicked by Apocalypse himself. They're basically like having four very strong right-hand men. The first of the Four Horsemen ever recruited by Apocalypse was Plague. She was recruited during the Mutant Massacre as Pestilence. The second was Abraham Kairos, who was given the name War. The third was Autumn Rolfson, who became Famine. And the last of the original Four Horsemen was Angel, who had lost his wings, but he was given awesome razor-sharp metal wings and blue skin to replace them. Because apparently if you're a mutant, having blue skin is all the rage. I mean, you got Nightcrawler, Beast, Mystique, Natiri. Yes, I know that last one is an avatar, but you guys get the point. Anyway, Apocalypse corrupted Angel and turned him into a cyborg called Death. But of course, Angel later regains his identity and helps his friends defeat Apocalypse, taking on the new codename Archangel. Now let's see, I told you a little bit about how Apocalypse was created, I told you about his origin, and I told you about his Four Horsemen. So now we have to talk about what a Banffy is, meaning let's talk about what he's capable of. Apocalypse is one of the most powerful mutants to have ever lived. He's actually one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, period. He has a wide variety of superpowers that were enhanced, modified, and amplified to be far beyond their original limits. They were amplified after exposure and merging with the celestial technology, which also allowed Apocalypse to gain several new powers as well. Because of this, Apocalypse has several superhuman powers unlike most mutants. Apocalypse's powers seem to have no limits. Even Apocalypse himself has said he is still not fully aware of the powers he has been given from the celestial starship. Apocalypse's powers will constantly grow and evolve to higher and greater levels over time, and his celestial armor is almost impossible to break or penetrate. Apocalypse can also shapeshift. He has complete control over his body, meaning he can turn his limbs into hammers, saws, plasma cannons, and so on. He can also alter his size and mass, which most of us probably remember from the 90s X-Men cartoon, but we even see it briefly in the X-Men Apocalypse trailer. So needless to say, it would suck having to fight someone who could do all of that. Going through his powers in rapid fire style, he can also shoot energy blast, he can fly, he has super speed, telepathy, telekinesis, a genius level intellect, and he's a tactical genius. Now, even though he has all these powers, he does have a weakness. The downside to Apocalypse being altered by celestial technology and his power enhancement was that the techno-organic virus was needed to allow this to happen. And because of this, his body is slowly being eaten away by the virus itself, causing him to find and switch bodies regularly by transforming his consciousness and powers into another host when one becomes too weak. Now, before I give you all some reading recommendations for Apocalypse, I just want to state that I know I left out several parts and events of Apocalypse's history, but everything I did mention is enough to give you guys a solid overview of the character. But all this brings us to reading recommendations. You have Age of Apocalypse, The Rise of Apocalypse, Executioner's Song, The Apocalypse Solution, and Fall of the Mutants. From May 23rd through June 5th, cops are stepping up enforcement to crack down on motorists who are not wearing their seatbelts. When you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're risking serious injury or death. And unlike a TV show or a movie, there's no rewinding and no do-overs. Why do cops enforce seatbelt laws? Because in real life, you don't get a second chance. If you get in a crash without wearing your seatbelt, you only have a 50-50 chance of surviving. Compared to other things we think of as dangerous like skydiving, lightning strikes, and snake bites, those odds are extremely high. So remember, click it or ticket. First up for Wednesday, May 25th, we have Justice League issue 50. This is it, the massive 48-page conclusion to the Darkseid War. And finally, we have DC Rebirth issue 1. Putting it plain and simple, if you want to know where the future of the DC universe is going, you have to read this comic. And that brings another episode of Variant to a close. But remember, you can always like our Variant Facebook page to keep up with the show and all things comic related. You could also follow Variant on Twitter at Variant Comics or this face on Twitter at Arris_Quinones. And if you like the channel, be sure to subscribe. But I'll see you guys next week when I talk about all things comics. Extremely powerful mutant. So what better ideas? But now it's time to talk to you about his powers. And he's got some bam bum 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 boom ba boom ba boop boop. Never saw the light of day if not for a last moment